Hello, welcome. Dr. Sushma Singh this side. Today in Unit 3, Village Studies in India, we are going to start our lecture on topic General Features of the Village. Unlike the tribal communities, the Indian villages had a considerable degree of diversity. This diversity was both internal as well as external. The village was internally differentiated in diverse grouping and had a complex structure of social relationship and institutional arrangements. There were also different kinds of villages in different parts of the country. Even within a particular region of country, not all villages were alike. The stereotypical image of the Indian village as an self-sufficient community was contested by anthropological studies. Batley, for example, argued at least as far back in the time as living memory went, there was no reason to believe that the village was fully self-sufficient in the economic sphere. Similarly, Srinivas too contested the colonial notion of the Indian village as being a completely self-sufficient republic. The village, he argued, was always a part of a wider entity. However, despite this contention about the village having linked with the outside world and explicating the diversities that marked the rural society of India, it was the unity of the village that was underlined by most anthropologists. The fact that the village interacted with the outside world did not mean it did not have a design of its own or could not be studied as a representative unit of Indian social life. While villages had horizontal ties, it was the vertical ties within the village that governed much of the life of the average person in the village. The village provided an important source of identity to its residents. Different scholars placed different emphasis on how significant the village identity was when compared to the other sources of the identification, such as those of the caste, class, and locality. Srinivas argued that the village's individual in his village had a sense of identification with their village, and an insult to one's village had to be avenged like an insult to oneself wife, or oneself family. Similarly, Dubey argued that though the Indian village varied greatly in their internal structure and organization, in their ethos and worldview, and their life ways and thought ways, an account of variety of factors, village communities all over the Indian subcontinent had a number of common features. Village settlements as a unit of social organization represented a kind of solidarity which was different from that of kin, the caste, and the class. Each village was a distinct identity, had some individual mores and uses, and possessed a corporate unity. Different castes and communities inhabiting the village were integrated in its economic, social, and ritual pattern by ties of mutual and reciprocal obligations sanctioned and sustained by generally accepted conventions. Notwithstanding the existence of the groups and factions inside the settlement, people of the village could and did face the outside world as an organized, compact whole. It was W. H. Weiser who had initially, in his classic study of the Hindu Jajmani system, first published in 1936, had conceptualized the social relationship among caste groups in the Indian village in the framework of reciprocity. The framework of reciprocity implied that though the village social organization was hierarchical, it was the interdependence among different caste groups and characterized by the underlying spirit of the Indian village. Reciprocity implied explicitly or implicitly an exchange of equal services and non-exploitative relations. Mutual gratification was supposed to be the outcome of reciprocal exchange. Each serves the other, each in turn is master, each in turn is servant. Though the later studies were much more elaborate and contained long description of different forms of social inequalities and differences in the rural society, many of them continued to use the framework of reciprocity, particularly while conceptualizing unity of the village social life. However, not everyone emphasized the unity of the village the way Srinivas and Dubey or earlier Weiser did. Some of the anthropologists explicitly contested that the unity thesis, while others qualified their arguments by recognizing the conflicts within the village and the ties that villagers had with the outside world. For instance, Paul Herbert, in his study of the South Indian village, although arguing that the caste system provided a source of stability to the village, also underlined the fact that the deep-seated cleavages underlies the apparent unity of the village and fragmented it into numerous social groups. Similarly, Batley had argued that his study of village Siripuram as a whole constituted a unit in a physical sense, and to a much lesser extent in a social sense. Among those who nearly rejected the idea of communitarian unity were Lewis and Bailey. F.G. Bailey, for example, provided a radical critique of the unity reciprocity thesis and offered an alternative perspective, stressing on the corrosive aspects of caste relations. He writes, "Those who find the caste system to their taste have aggregated the harmony with which the system works by stressing the degree of the interdependence between the different castes. Interdependence means that everyone depends on everyone else. It means reciprocity. From this, it is easy to slip into ideas of equality because men are equally dependent on another. They are assumed to be equal in other ways. Equality of rank is so manifestly false when applied to a caste system that the final step in the argument is seldom taken, and exposition rests upon a representation of mutual interdependence, and the hint that because one caste could bring the system to a standstill by refusing to play its part, castes do not in fact use this sanction to maintain their rights against the rest. In fact, of course, the system is held together not so much by ties of reciprocity but by the concentration of one of its parts. The system works the way it does because the corrosive sanctions are all in the hands of the dominant caste. There is a tie of reciprocity, but it is not a sanction of which the dependent caste can make easy use. However, this kind of a perspective did not become popular among the sociologists, anthropologists during 1950s and 1960s. They continued to work largely within the unity reciprocity framework with the varied degrees of emphasis. Here we want to close this lecture. Thanks for listening.